The official story of the Titanic is simple: a tragic accident caused by a lone iceberg. An unavoidable fate. But what if it wasn't an accident? What if the ship's fate wasn't sealed by the iceberg, but by a single decision made hours before the impact? The truth of what happened that night is far more complex than the story we all know. And it forces us to ask one question: why did the world's unsinkable ship sail directly into a disaster when it could have been prevented? The answer begins not in the icy waters of the Atlantic, but in the very idea of the Titanic itself. A story of ambition, pride, and an almost religious belief that for the first time in history, man had built something that nature could not defeat. It starts here. On April 10, 1912, the largest moving object ever built by human hands was launched into the ocean. People called it unsinkable. A ship so mighty, some dared to say even God himself couldn't sink it. The Titanic was 882 feet long, wrapped in steel and carrying 2,200 people, including celebrities, the ship's vice president, and its crew. But it was more than just a marvel of engineering. It was a floating palace. For many in third class, like the family of 9-week-old Milvina Dean, the ship represented a single, precious chance for a new life in America.
My father was going to open a tobacconist shop in Kansas. He spent all his money on that, and then couldn't afford to do anything else but go in third class, because it was such a luxury ship. All the millionaires were on it, and also the most important thing was they said it was unsinkable.
All those on board were entrusted to the command of Captain Edward J. Smith, tasked with bringing them from London to New York in just 6 days. That trust was absolute. His reputation was so legendary they called him the Titan of the Sea.
He was nicknamed the Millionaire's Captain. People like Guggenheim or even J.P. Morgan would actually change their sailings and their travel arrangements so that they could sail in a ship commanded by Captain Smith.
The Titanic's maiden voyage was to be Captain Smith's last before retirement, and his confidence in the magnificent vessel was absolute. For the first 2 days, the journey was flawless. Passengers dined and danced under the stars as the ship sailed west across a remarkably calm Atlantic. But the ship was sailing toward a danger that was ancient and unseen. Far to the north, an iceberg, calved from a glacier centuries before, had survived its long, slow journey south. Now it had drifted into the heavily trafficked shipping lanes of the North Atlantic, directly into the Titanic's path. 2 journeys, one of ancient ice and the other of human ambition, were now on a collision course. And on the Titanic's bridge, the first signs of that convergence were about to arrive. The first warning was simple: bergs, growlers, and field ice directly ahead. Captain Smith acknowledged it, but held his speed, trusting the ship's design over the clear danger ahead. Hours later, the warnings intensified. Another ship reported large fields of ice, but no order was given to slow down. Minutes after that, a message placed 2 large icebergs directly in the Titanic's path. Only minutes later, another message spotted an iceberg directly near Titanic's route. America passed 2 large icebergs in 41.27 degrees north, 50.8 degrees west on the 14th of April. Smith reportedly showed this to White Star Chairman J. Bruce Ismay, who was on board. But still, no action was taken. It was a direct warning from a ship already trapped in the ice ahead. The Titanic pressed on.
In the time of Titanic, captain after captain testified that they would continue their course and speed until they actually sighted ice, trusting that they would have time to avoid it.
This was the clearest warning: a massive ice field directly in their path. But overloaded with passenger telegrams, the wireless operators set it aside, leaving the bridge blind to the danger. The final warning was, we are stopped and surrounded by ice. It came from a ship already trapped in the field ahead. But Titanic's operator, Jack Phillips, brushed it aside and replied as, "Shut up." I'm working Cape Race. This final critical warning was never passed to the bridge. It was dismissed entirely. It's easy to blame the operator, but we want to ask you, in that high-pressure situation, with messages flooding in, what would you have done differently? We're genuinely curious to read your thoughts. By nightfall, the conditions were deceptively perfect. A moonless sky and a sea as flat and still as glass.
Beasley actually says that it seemed that there were more stars in the sky than gaps between the stars. And so they thought, let's make speed while we can.
Then at 11:40 p.m., the captain's confidence in the ship's steel hull broke at the exact same time. The impact was a low, grinding vibration, so subtle that many passengers barely noticed.
There was a very slight bump, just a little jar, nothing at all.
She said at 10 minutes to 12, she felt a slight bump. And she said it was just like a train pulling into a station. It just jerked.
On the bridge, the officers knew this was no minor strike. A 300-foot gash below the waterline was flooding the forward compartments at an alarming rate, and the ship began to slow. J. Bruce Ismay later testified that he felt a vibration and went to inquire. His first question to Captain Smith was, "What happened?" Smith's reply was brief, "We have struck ice." When Ismay pressed further, asking if the ship was seriously damaged, the captain's answer confirmed their worst fears. "I am afraid she is." Below deck, chaos became a desperate reality. Cold, black water rushed through torn steel as the crew pounded on doors, trying to wake passengers. But their warnings were met with a dangerous disbelief. For many, the thought was simply impossible. How could the unsinkable Titanic truly be in danger?
Contrary to expectations, there was quite a lot of merriment going on among the passengers because they believed they were safe, they actually believed Titanic wouldn't sink, they believed it was ridiculous that they were being asked to put their life jackets on.
This denial had fatal consequences. As lifeboats were lowered, many were sent down half empty, partly because the crew was disorganized, but also because passengers were reluctant to leave the perceived safety of the massive ship for a small boat in the freezing dark. Amid the growing confusion, the band famously continued to play, light, cheerful music filling the icy air.
And so the band is playing actually quite light-hearted music.
On the deck, Captain Smith struggled to maintain order, his quiet, authoritative presence unable to fight the growing panic.
Smith's probably even actually sweating, certainly Lightoller was dripping in sweat at this time.
For many passengers, the true gravity of the situation only hit when the warnings became personal.
A man came to my door, his teeth were chattering. He said, "Madam, get up, get out. You know, they're making the women and children leave in lifeboats."
But as the deck tilted at an impossible angle, denial gave way to despair. Some dove into the freezing water. Others simply prayed or held their children close. The ship's lights flickered and died, plunging the chaos into darkness. With a groan of twisting steel heard for miles, the Titanic, once called Unsinkable, began to break.
Oh, I saw that ship sink. And I saw that ship break in half.
In just 2.5 hours, the Titanic sank, taking 1,500 people with it, including Captain Edward Smith. But this was no act of fate. It was the direct consequence of a chain of human choices, ignored warnings, a delayed evacuation, and too few lifeboats.
And we heard the dreadful sound of people drowning, which was, unbelievable. And then, because our lifeboat was so full, so overfull.
And then came the questions. How could a ship once called Unsinkable now lie at the bottom of the Atlantic? The world demanded answers. Official inquiries began, and the company's chairman, Bruce Ismay, was called to testify about his survival. "I assisted as best I could, getting the boats out and putting the women and children into the boats. The inquiry revealed the Titanic was traveling at a dangerous speed, a fact the company chairman, J. Bruce Ismay, admitted. When you bring out a new ship, you naturally do not start her running at full speed." He added, "She was going 75 revolutions on Tuesday." Though officially cleared, the public's verdict on Ismay was merciless. Condemned for escaping in a lifeboat while others perished, he was forced to resign in disgrace and live the rest of his life under that shadow. On the Titanic, a series of unthinkable choices led to disaster. But in the Andes, one unthinkable choice led to survival. Click here to see the story of the survivors of Flight 571, who were forced to become cannibals to live.